Hey y'all, welcome to episode 2 of Rooted with Resilience. I am your host, Sabrina, and I know that it's been a long time. I apologize for the wait. I just had to take some much needed time. There was a lot going on with my life and with my family. So I recorded my first episode in October, and it was October 1st. Went great. I felt great. Was super motivated and looking forward to my future episodes. My plan and my goal was to do or record an episode per week. 3 days later, I received a phone call, or I was actually asleep, and I woke up to about 13 missed calls from my uncle, and then about 13 missed calls from my cousin Natasha. And when I seen those missed calls, I just knew something was wrong. My first instinct, I don't know why, God bless my cousin Eric, but I just immediately thought that something was wrong with him because he's battling cancer, and it came from my cousin and my uncle, which is my aunt, and that's Eric's mother's husband. That's the only reason why I thought it was him, because I'm like, oh my gosh, all those missed calls, always something bad happened. So I called my cousin Tasha because I felt like I wanted to hear the news from her. We grew up together. I felt more comfortable. No offense to my uncle, but I just wanted her to be able to relay the news, just in case if I broke down, she would be my confidant. So when I call her back, she tells me that my nephew, which is my cousin's son, but we all grew up together, so we call our kids nieces and nephews. So she told me that her nephew, which is her actual nephew, passed away in a tragic car accident. He was only 21. That was my cousin, Baby Edwin. Rest in peace, Baby Edwin. We love and miss you every day. And I immediately lost it. I was crying. I was yelling no. He lives in Massachusetts. He lived in Massachusetts, and I live out here. So we hadn't seen him in a while. But our families are very close, and, I lived with them at one point in my life. So this was a hard blow. And the simple fact that he's only 21 years old, it's not supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to bury the younger generation. We're not supposed to bury our children, our nieces, our nephews. That is what I feel hit the most. It's supposed to be the older generation, then us, then the next generation. So that was just extremely difficult. And it was just 3 days later from my podcast. So here I am, all upbeat and ready to go. And that happens. October's already a very hard month for me and for my family, because we've been celebrating my grandmother's anniversary for the past 28 years. She died when I was 7. Rest in peace, Grandma. And we celebrate her anniversary on October 17th, which is the day that she passed away. Then my son's dad passed away October 12th. And then now Baby Edwin. So it was already a hard month coming in, but I was motivated to start the month of October and turn something that is hard for me into something positive, that I can speak about the tragic loss of my son's father, just kind of speak about our good times and things like that, just to kind of help me, go have the month go smoothly. But when we got that news, it was extremely difficult for my family. And then I couldn't go down there to the funeral, so that was difficult, but we were able to FaceTime and things like that. But what made things even more difficult is his father, which is my first cousin, is incarcerated right now. So he had to hear the news of the loss of his son while he was incarcerated. They allowed him to view the service, but it was over a camera. So I just, it really just broke my heart for him, because I just couldn't imagine, bearing my child, first of all, and not being able to be physically present to bury his son. That was just very devastating. My heart broke for his mother, Jody, the Davila family. And, I lived out there for 4 years, and I lived with them for, a few months. And we got really close, and I got to see firsthand how close they are. This family is super close. All the events, they go all out. They don't, mess around about their kids. They are just, on top of everything, and they are very close knit. So I know that this really hit their family very, very hard, and it's a very devastating loss, and my heart and prayers always go out to Jody, my cousin, Edwin, Tito, that's what we call him, and just the whole Davila family and us. It's just, we took a heavy hit, with him, and that kind of deterred me from, pursuing that goal of, getting back with my podcast, and kind of falling back, because, I suffer from depression, and I was, doing well. I was on my medication. This is a very open platform, so I am very vulnerable with my mental health and how I care for my mental health. So I have no issues saying that I was on medication and now I'm back on medication, because sometimes in life we go through things and we need a boost. We need that help, and sometimes we can't help ourselves because we're struggling, very severely. And medication, some people are against it, and that's okay. Big Pharma, I definitely have my opinions and my thoughts on Big Pharma with, pushing other things. But, when it comes to, taking medication to help these disorders, I'm all for that, because it truly helps. And take it from someone that, it helped and it is currently helping. I always see the difference. My family also sees the differences, especially my mother, and that whole situation, baby Edwin, and then also, October always being a hard month, because my son is still so young, and my heart just breaks for him because he doesn't have his dad, and that, puts a lot of pressure on me as a mother. But, I put my feelings aside because, he is the one that's living without his father in the physical form. And I have to be strong for him and always make sure that we do things to remember his dad, because, he matters. His life mattered. And no matter the circumstances before he passed away, what it was, what matters is that we shared a life. This baby, which is Josiah, was made out of love, and he's here without his dad, so no matter what, we're always going to remember him. and it's fresh. So that's why it's always still difficult for me. And it doesn't matter how much time goes by. If this person was close to you, it could be 20 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years. It still hurts. You know, when people say time heals all wounds, no, it doesn't. You know, we just, over the years, we learn how to, you know, accept that they're gone and be able to carry on. But we still remember them, you know, that hole is still in our hearts. But, you know, when it's still fresh, it's kind of like it's hard to get up, you know, and that's kind of where I was at with it. You know, I was stuck for a little bit, and adding that news with baby Edwin, that really just, you know, added more to, you know, my feelings and things like that. So, you know, I fell back into my depression. And when you are depressed, you do not have any motivation to do anything for yourself. I was getting up, I was doing what I had to do for my son because I'm still a mother, but I was running on autopilot. I was doing what I needed to do for him, but I was walking dead. So when it came to him, I did what I had to do, but I wasn't doing it like entirely. So it's like, I know he felt it. You know, kids feel things, especially with their mothers. They feel when you're off. So I know that he felt it, and it showed in his behaviors at school. He was having a really hard month in October, and I know that the weight of all of this, including his dad, he felt that, you know, and he seen that I was sad and I wasn't myself. So, you know, that all plays its part, you know, but like I said, when you are in deep depression, you have no desire to take care of yourself. You have no, it's not even a desire. Of course you have a desire. You want to do this, you want to do that, but you have no motivation. You know, it's like you're stuck somewhere else. You know, with people with depression, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very hard to explain, but it's like you're sinking. You know, there's this series called Made on Netflix. I don't know if anyone's watched it. It's definitely a very deep series. I had to watch one episode at a time because it was triggering. But they did a great job with really describing how someone deals with depression. And there was a scene where she was literally sinking into the couch and she just went somewhere else. And that's literally a depiction of what depression is. And you have no desire to take care of yourself, and no desire to do anything for yourself. So I fell off of my regimen with my medication, so that didn't help. And I just, you know, I was walking dead. But here I am, you know, I had to take that time off to really get back to me, to Sabrina. And I'm really happy and proud to say that I'm feeling a lot better. I'm back on my medication, and it's still baby steps. I'm still grieving these losses, but it definitely feels good to be doing things back, you know, being responsible and getting up out of my bed and, you know, taking care of myself, having more motivation to do things, and, you know, tapping into my creativity, you know, because when you're dealing with that depression, you lose focus on your purpose. You know, you become trapped and you kind of fall off. Like I fell off with God, you know, like my relationship with God. I stopped talking to him. I stopped reading the word, and that's not good. You know, when you lose that relationship with God, or you fall back from him, you allow Satan to play mind tricks on you, you know, and he slithers his way in, like the snake that he is. And he, because you're the most vulnerable at that point. He comes in and he tells you all these lies, how you're worthless and how you're, you don't amount to nothing. And, these horrible things. He gives you those flashbacks. If you suffer from PTSD, he gives you those flashbacks of, just all these things that went wrong. And all that's doing, like, his motivation is to hold us back from our purpose, from God, like from God's purpose that he has for us. He holds us back from that. So my message is, you got to stay focused and consistent. Consistency is key. As hard as it is to get up and fight every day, you got to do it. You got to stay consistent, because once you're not consistent, because that was my issue. Once you're not consistent, you lose sight of what's going on, and what you're supposed to be doing. And that starts becoming a routine. Whatever you're doing, like when you fall back, that's what becomes the routine. So you got to just, make sure that you stay focused and, get back with God, start talking to him. We're not meant to carry our own problems. We're not meant to lean on our own understanding. We could be stuck in, I got this, I got it all figured out, I know it all, especially when you're in a moment or in a place of, anger, depression, and things are going wrong. Things are like, all the bad things are hitting you back to back to back. Very easy to lose focus on God, and your purpose. But, once you start really tapping in to the word and talking to him, he's going to give you those reminders. He's going to give you that motivation that you need. And you're going to feel lighter. You're going to feel free, because you're not carrying these things anymore. Of course you think about it. Of course you still hurt. Of course you're still in pain. But you feel lighter and you feel free, because you're not weighed down by all that baggage, because you're throwing your burden onto God. And that's what he tells us to do in the Bible, So we got to just, make sure that we stay focused and consistent with prayer, with reading the word, with just taking care of our mental health, with self-care, period. We have to take time and do nice things for ourselves and relax. And especially if you're constantly on the go, it's hard. It's not hard. It's easy to lose sight on yourself, especially if you're a single mom, dealing with loss and grief, especially. You definitely, there's no days off, and it's hard, because life is lifing for all of us. So it's hard to have, that village, and it's hard to, check on each other. So, we out here really in the trenches. We watch these videos of, people that, like, first of all, I just want a PSA, public service announcement. What you see online, that's why I love raw content, like real content, because that's real. When you see all these, everything looks perfect, that's a facade, and a part of that too is that they have help. They got two parents in the household. They got two incomes in the household. They're doing great. So you see these nice cars, you see this nice house, you see them doing things with their kids every day, and things are just easy, and you're like, wow, that looks beautiful, like I would love to have that and do that, and we're out here in the trenches, point blank, period. We really out here in the trenches, because it's just us. We dealing with loss, we dealing with grief, all while raising a human. That's why I tell people, check on your people. especially the people that got it like a little worse than you and that are really just going through it. They don't have that help, and it's not easy, so check on your people. And also words of encouragement helps. When you criticize someone that is already feeling like crap, all you're doing is kicking them while they're down. So people got to really choose their words wisely when they're speaking to people. Always choose kindness or say nothing at all. Just be a listening ear. Sometimes it's hard for people to just be quiet and listen. I know I'm a rambler and things, but I'm a great listener. Like, I know how to really listen to someone that's going through something, especially because, I go through it too, and sometimes that's all a person needs is just to have someone there to listen, and yeah, we gotta like, make sure that we take care of ourselves, moms, and give ourselves a little bit more credit. Sometimes we feel like we're not doing enough, like we could do more, and sometimes we can do more, but we're exhausted. Okay? Like, that's it. And we don't need people coming in and saying, you got to do this and you got to do that. Like, they could do it better. Like, just mind your business and, show support. Really, that's it. That's the message. Mind your business and show support. If you're not going to say nothing kind, then don't say nothing at all. Because it's already hard for us as moms. Imagine what goes on through our heads every day when we snap and we lose it. And we're like, we feel like, oh my gosh, like, why did I do that? I should have handled it this way. And, I wish I would have did this different, or I wish I could spend more time with my child, or I wish I can have the energy to, do more things. But it is what it is. We're taking baby steps and we're learning as we go, so when people come in and they criticize, it's very hurtful because we already know. FYI, we already know these things, so words of encouragement, advice is always welcome, but it's not what you say, it's how you say it sometimes, because someone could be like, let me think of an example, like, hey, did you take your kids out today? That's kind of like a nice way of, just a question. Versus, did you even take your kids out today? You know what I mean? Like, now I'm feeling like attacked. Like, what do you mean? Like, should I have taken my kids out? Like, I already know, maybe. But I just didn't have the energy. I was doing X, Y, and Z, and I just didn't have the energy. And sometimes we make things fun inside. Like, my favorite games with JoJo is playing doctor, because on the days that I'm feeling exhausted, I could be his patient and I can just lay down and he has a ball being my doctor, and then, sitting down, playing board games or building blocks, things like that, where I'm just still chilling. I don't got to do extra stuff. But, sometimes we do have to step out of our comfort zones and do that extra stuff. But sometimes we just don't have the energy, So when that person comes in and says, hey, did you take your kids out today? No, girl, I don't even have the energy. Versus, did you even take your kids out? Now I'm feeling like attacked, and I'm just like, why are you coming at me? Like, no, I didn't. And now it's kind of making me feel like crap that I didn't. So thank you. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of my advice to people, because I know that we're not perfect. I know that sometimes we feel like we can handle situations better, and maybe you can. But, sometimes we do have to step out of our comfort zones and do that extra stuff. But sometimes we just don't have the energy, So when that person comes in and says, hey, did you take your kids out today? No, girl, I don't even have the energy. Versus, did you even take your kids out? Now I'm feeling like attacked. Like, why are you coming at me? Like, no, I didn't. And now it's kind of making me feel like crap that I didn't. So thank you. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of my advice to people, because I know that we're not perfect. I know that sometimes we feel like we can handle situations better, and maybe you can. But we all need a little grace, especially moms that are doing it alone, or fathers that are doing it alone, or grandmothers that are doing it alone, or guardians that are doing it alone. It's hard out here. And like I said, we are in the trenches. And if you're dealing with grief and you're dealing with financial hardship and how to just navigate day-to-day things, your mind is overstimulated. We are overstimulated AF. So all we need is just grace. Hey, you're doing a great job. For real, girl. Like, for all that you're dealing with, I know that you're tired. I know you gotta be overstimulated. And, with all that you have on your plate, all that you've dealt with for the past year, for the past month, like, you are doing great. Just the fact that you're getting out of bed and you're playing with your kids. Because, girl, I probably would have been on the floor, bawling my eyes out. You understand? That's what people want to hear, because now you're putting a pep in their step, because they're already feeling like they're not doing enough. So when you tell them that, they're like, wow, like, thank you. I didn't even think I was. Like, you're right. You're right. Like, I'm actually like doing more than what I could be doing. I could have tapped out a long time ago with all that I'm dealing with. You understand? And I haven't. When you take mental breaks, that's not tapping out. That's not giving up. My kid is still with me. He hasn't got taken away by DCF. He's getting fed. He's getting taken to school. Like, come on. I could be doing a whole lot worse. I could be on the corner doing crack. Excuse my language. But, it's a real world going on out here. And it's a real war going on out here. So we got to give people more grace, for what they're doing. And I just applaud my moms, my single parents, single guardians, people that are just still making life okay for their kids. I see you. You're enough. Practice more self-care. Lean on God. Don't lean on your own understanding. When you feel weighed down, just know that there's people watching you. And when people watch you, they're like, wow, she's so beautiful, and, or he's so handsome, and look at them with their kids. And, people notice you. You feel like probably they don't. If you see someone staring, they might just be staring at you because they're like, wow, they're really good with their kids. And imagine if they knew what you were dealing with. So I just say that to say this, let's give people more grace. Let's give words of kindness. Even people without kids. There's people that can't see their kids. There's people out here that don't have kids and they're still dealing with a lot with their mental health. I see you too. Because life is lifing. Like, when I was coming up, like, I don't know if it was like this, but maybe I'm just noticing because now I'm an adult. But I don't remember life like that, maybe because it was simple. But I feel like even my mom and like the older generation, they say like things are just so different from how we were raising you guys. Like, we have it way worse, First of all, like, the economy is ridiculous. Like, how are we supposed to even survive? Especially like with one income. There's people, like, I know people that are married and they tell me that they're even struggling with 2 incomes. So imagine someone that's by themselves. Imagine that amount of pressure. So, I appreciate people that are pushing me to do bigger and greater things, because I have the potential and I need to see that in myself. And I do now, and I have seen it before too. But sometimes we lose sight of that because Satan is a liar. And what do we say? Satan, not today. For real. You're done. I'm not listening to you no more, because everything that he says, like all those negative thoughts that we have in our minds, that's the devil playing tricks on your mind. And he is a liar. You know, if you read God's word, none of that stuff says that. And you read what Job and David and all of his, you know, all the people in the Bible, they went through some stuff too. You know, like it's very encouraging to read that stuff, because you're like, dang, they were in the trenches for real. And they still kept their faith in God. So we can too. What's our excuse? You know, I know with social media, with all these distractions, you know, it's very easy to lose sight of our Lord and Savior, you know. But whenever I lose sight, my life goes down. You know, every time that I get back with him and I talk to him and I read his word and I'm consistent, I am just in overflow of good thoughts and, you know, tapped into my creativity. I could do this, I could do that. Like, I love it. I love it, because instead of like, I can't do this, I'm a failure, I'm a terrible mom, you feel shame, you feel angry, you feel guilt. None of that's coming from God. You know, so when he overflows you, you're still overstimulated, but at least you're overstimulated with good things, good thoughts. Like, now I have more motivation to be with my son and talk to him and give him what I'm overflowed with, because that's our duty as parents. You know, we have to raise them up and teach them the way. And I just love being able to talk to him, and I see the difference that it makes in his behavior, you know, because mommy's happy and we have God back in our lives. I mean, he's always been there. God never leaves our side. It's us that leaves him and abandons him and turns our back on him. Remember that. He never leaves us. He's right there all along, you know, and he's our parent. So imagine him like, girl, you know, I done told you about that. I done told you that's not the way. Why do you keep going that way? So, you know, it's not to like, you know, feel weighed down with pity, or not pity, but, you know, blame yourself and be weighed down with shame. But it's kind of just a reminder, you know, that God never leaves us. He's holding our hand the whole time. And we have to make sure that we're making the right choices in our lives and we're following him, because if we aren't, then the responsibility and the blame is on us. You know, we're the cause of that, not God. So we just got to make sure that we're staying on his side, and yeah, you know, and I definitely want to speak a little bit about my situation with my oldest son, because that is also a huge reason of the pain and the isolation and feeling stuck has came from, is my baby boy. You know, he's 17, he'll be 18 in March, but he will always be my baby boy. You know, all my parents know what I mean by that. You know, my son was just a bright young boy, so curious, so full of life and talented, and loved to read books and playing outside. And, you know, all of a sudden there was just a switch, you know, and we all could look back and be like, you know, that was us too. You know, we were little girls and little boys, and then we started realizing, you know, the real world. You know, we started having these big feelings, and when you're young and you have these big feelings and trauma that's happened to you, it can get too much. And as a young kid, you know, how do you navigate through that? especially without the right tools, without the right guidance. One thing I could say about my son is that, and I always, not always, but now I had to snap out of it, because when everything first happened, of course, as a mother, as a parent, you're like, what did I do? What could I have done to prevent this? But then that could weigh you down, and it did. I felt very guilty. I felt a lot of shame. I felt, a lot of just loneliness, because, he wasn't here anymore. And those feelings can really suck you up, and they did. But then I had to start realizing, like, I did give him the tools. I put him in therapy since he was 5 years old. He's been in and out of therapy. I always took him to these places and, to evaluate him. And, like anytime that I seen something was off, like, these new things, like I was very like OCD with my kid, and now I'm like that with Josiah as well. And it's okay to be like that, because at least you're paying attention to your kids' feelings and emotions, and you're trying to help them the best way that you can. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you go to these resources to get that help. So I definitely applaud myself, and I give myself credit, which I wasn't before, but I give myself credit for doing that, because there's a lot of parents that will just be like, oh, this is normal, they'll grow out of it, they'll be okay, just suck it up, especially with boys. Oh my gosh, what are you crying about? You acting like a girl, like that's crazy. Everybody has feelings. Real men cry, and these are boys, these are boys coming up. And if they were taught that, that's why we have so many broken men, but that's another conversation. We'll save that for like another episode. But it's true. A lot of these people that are walking around broken is because of their childhoods, and they weren't raised correctly, and they weren't given the tools, and now we have to navigate through parenthood and helping ourselves and getting those tools that we didn't get. No shade on our parents, because it was a different time, but that's the reality, so if you know better, or if you knew better, you do better. So that was the reason why I was so adamant. It was so important for me to get my oldest, Rayshawn, the help that he needed, so I didn't stop at nothing. I was always trying to help him. I was going to these different companies and resources and trying to help him. And at first it was like, because he was still a boy. But when he got older, it's just sad, man. Like, it's really sad how many of these companies just don't care. You'll come across people that really care, but they work for these big time companies that don't care. So they have empathy for your situation, but their policies are trash. You understand? So they were turning their backs on my son. And I remember one time, because he was really going down. He was really going down, and I was so concerned for him. My mom was concerned for him, because it was just like, what are you doing? He was really crashing out. And I didn't just allow him to do that. Like, I was going to these places, and when I tried to Baker Act my son, they turned their back on him. They said, oh, he sobered up, because it was, a time that he got like really intoxicated, and I called the ambulance because he was acting weird. And good thing I did, because his alcohol volume was extremely high. And I speak openly like this because we all go through it, and a parent might be looking at this like, wow, I ain't the only one. So this is not telling his business. This is, speaking real life, and bringing awareness and getting the message out. But yeah, so I tried to Baker Act him, and it worked. They said they were going to Baker Act him, and I signed the forms. They ended up calling me the next day. So a Baker Act, I don't know if that's only in Florida, but they do a 72-hour hold, and he meets with all these psychiatrists, and they really evaluate him deeper, like on a deeper level, because he's there for 72 hours. He's not just like going there and coming home, so they really get to dig deep on what's going on. And if they feel after that 72 hours like he needs to come back, I recommend a treatment for him. That was my goal, because he was really struggling, and he went in there as a 16-year-old intoxicated. So why wouldn't you help me? Of course he needs treatment, but they make it hard for you. So they call me the next day, and they're like, hey, you could pick him up now. Mind you, he's still in the hospital, like the regular hospital. He wasn't, like, they never even picked him up to do a 72-hour hold. So I was very confused. I'm like, what do you mean? I thought they were gonna pick him up, and I Baker acted him, and they said, oh no, now he's sober, and the doctor came in, which is not a psychiatrist, it's an MD. Like, how do you have the medical knowledge of mental health and all that? Like, I know that we study these things, I went to nursing school, we study that, but that's not your area of expertise. He's sober, so he can master manipulate you and make it seem like he's okay. But as his parent, I'm telling you that he's not. So I went to the hospital and I tried to fight it. And unfortunately, they were like, we're not going to take him. So you need to take him home. He's sobered up and he's talking regular. He doesn't seem like he has any issues. So he's getting released. So that fueled the fire in me to make more phone calls and try to get him treatment somewhere else. So I spoke with someone, and I remember he was a Hispanic male because I could hear the accent in his voice. He told me something very disturbing, but it's the reality, because this is my reality now. I didn't know it then, but it's crazy the words that he said to me, and how much it came to light. He told me, hey, we can't do nothing to help you. And I was getting frustrated, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, he has issues, like he needs help. He's just a minor, like he's just a teenager, like he needs help. And I'm telling you that I'm, raising this boy every day, and he's declining. He's a very savvy speaker. He's very knowledgeable. He's very intelligent. He's very smooth, and he's a good-hearted person, but he's really declining as far as, like, he's really deep into the streets. He's living a double life. I don't know if he's in a gang. Like, I don't know what's going on. I try to talk to him, but of course he's going to tell me something else. But this guy tells me, because he sees that I'm a concerned mother, so now he gives me the real. Because at first he was speaking from a personal place, and then he's like, listen, I'm going to tell you something, and it's the hard reality, or harsh reality. He said, I'm the younger brother, my older brother, growing up, he struggled, just like you're explaining how your son is struggling. And my mom was the same way, because he's an adult male, so his brother has to be like, he sounded like he was probably like in his like late 30s, early 40s. So his brother got to be like, in his 40s. So he's like, growing up, he really struggled and he had a hard time. And my mom tried to get help for him, but they didn't really help him. They either turned him away, or they made it extremely difficult. Like if he was on probation, he didn't meet certain criterias and all that. So like literally it was like he was explaining my story. It was crazy, because it's literally the exact same. When Rayshawn was on probation, there's programs that he could have went to. So when he was in and out of juvie, I'm like, what is going on? Like, he's going to go back, He's going to come out and do the same thing and end up back. So what is the resolution? What are you guys going to do to prevent him from going back? Why don't you send him to one of these programs? And they told me the same thing. He doesn't meet the criteria. I'm like, how does he not meet the criteria? Like, his charges were ridiculous. So I'm like, how does he not meet the criteria? Crazy, mind blown. So this guy's telling me that it was the same exact thing. That his mother literally went through loopholes after loophole, and she couldn't get the help that she needed for him. All she could do was like put him in therapy and, these programs that they like anger management, and, those programs don't work. I'm sorry to say, they do not work. They might work for older adults that are ready to get help and talk about their problems. They are aware that they have a problem and they're admitting, and they're going to be more willing. But when you're talking about teenagers that are like, I don't got no issues, I'm this and that, and they don't see that they have a problem. They don't want help. So they're going to go in these places and be like, oh, I'm fine. I don't got no issues, and that's the problem. That's the problem. So he told me that his mom, that's all she could do for him was pretty much put him in therapy and put him through these programs. And he ended up committing a crime, and he is serving life in prison. And he said that that's what motivated him to do what he's doing, to help others. And he said that, the company that he works for, it doesn't really help, and this all happened in New York. So he said it's the same stuff as in New York. So Florida's no different. It's just the world that we live in, America. It's crazy. The laws are crazy. The criminal justice system is designed. It's modern day slavery, and it's just sad how much, they turn their backs. Like, the system really failed my son, because if they would have listened to me, if they would have helped my son, if they would have put him somewhere and got him the help that he needed, where they have men, they have mentors, they have role models, they have psychiatrists that could have given him extensive therapy, he would have been here right now. And it baffles me how much they really don't care about our kids. So I read this article, and I'm going to read it to you. Basically speaking about modern day slavery. So it says, over a century and a half since the abolition of slavery, the dreaded institution, if I said that word wrong, I apologize. The dreaded institution still lives in one another, dressed up form. Taking advantage of a constitutional loophole, corporate profiteers continue the modern day version of the convict lease system. In the land of the free, the dollar still takes precedence over human rights. And that which can be monetized, can't even talk today, and exploited for profit will be regardless of ethical or moral considerations. Once again, race, criminal justice, and capitalism have joined forces to deprive captive black and brown bodies of their human rights. In the age of President Donald Trump and hardliner Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the return to law and order and a war on drugs signals a reversal of progress the U.S. was making, untethering itself from the expansive grip of a carceral state. Because the law that Obama had, Trump reversed that. So it says the anniversary of last year's prison strike is a chilling reminder that one need not point to regimens in distant countries to find examples of blatant labor rights violations. If you want to find slavery in the U.S., look no further than its penitentiaries jails and detention centers, where the consequences of being locked up extend much farther than doing time. And this is a known source, like it's a credible source. And, reading that, it's like, a lot of people might have their opinions, and that's okay. But that's just the reality of our criminal justice system. It is diverse, but our black and brown boys and our black and brown men, like, they just have a design to fail them, and it's a system, that they have, to keep letting them out, because they're like, he's gonna mess up again, and the crimes are just gonna get worse, and then we're gonna get him to the point that we lock him up and throw away the key. But I have faith in my Lord, and he has the final say. I am not going to be discouraged. I'm not going to be weighed down by the thoughts that I have of my son in there, because right now he's in the juvenile side. When he turns 18, like on his 18th birthday, which is in 2 months, at midnight, they don't waste no time. At midnight for his birthday, they're going to be transferring him to the adult side. So instead of having a party and a birthday cake and, a celebration with his family and friends, he's going to be getting transferred to the adult jail. And, that just breaks my heart as a mother. It makes me worried. But I have faith in my Lord and Savior, and I know that he's got us. He saved my son no matter what, because my son was heading nowhere fast. A lot of people might be like, what do you mean he saved him? He's in jail right now facing serious time and all that. But my son could have got killed. The stuff that he was doing, somebody could have came up and either killed all of us as a family, because people don't be caring. They run up in houses and they do all types of stuff. I was raised in the hood, so I already know what's up. And I told him these things. That's why I was like, why are you doing it? But that's neither here nor there. Kids don't listen. My mom used to tell me stuff and it went through one ear and out the other. But, the punchline is that, I have faith that God has a plan for my son. He needed to sit him down somewhere to really think about his choices and think about, his plan for his future. And I have faith that my son is going to find God again and accept God again in his heart and his life while he's in there. And when he comes out, he's going to be a better man. And I just can't wait for that day, because I know that day is going to happen. But yeah, so, I feel like I can go on and on and on. I apologize in advance if this episode was depressing or triggering. But this is my reality. This is the reality of my family, of my loved ones. We're going through it. Please keep us in your prayers. But, I really want to be open and honest to my viewers. And a lot of people, honestly, they might be like, what are you talking about, girl? Like, I'm going through it worse, or I'm going through it too. I really feel that. I'm so happy that you made me feel like I'm not alone. So I really hope that me sharing my story is going to encourage others and bring awareness and help people to feel like they're not alone, and help people to get closer to God, because you can't do it alone. Your mental health matters. You're important. You are not worthless. God created you individually, down to the hairs on your head, down to your toes. And he designed you very carefully. And guess what? Nobody is you. Nobody can do the things that you do. You are unique, and you are resilient. It's in our blood. We are rooted with resilience because we have God on our side, and we can do all things, we could do all things. I know there's a scripture. I just had a brain fart. But yeah, so I just say that to say this, I just really want to encourage others, and I really want to help bring awareness. We can do all things. But yeah, so I really hope that you guys, find comfort in my podcast episode. All my podcast episodes are not going to be like this, I promise. But this is going to be kind of, the topic of, I don't know, my internet's not working. This is going to be the majority of the things that I talk about because, yes, there we go. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Amen. Philippians 4:13. When I have something in my head and I can't remember it or I can't think of it, I'm like, I know it's on the tip of my tongue. I shut down and I'm like, I gotta find the answer, and I love that about myself because I won't stop at nothing to do the research and make sure that I say things correctly. And yeah, so that's it. God be speaking, God be Goddin'. So he literally wanted me to say that after I said all those nice, encouraging things, because it's true. You may feel weak right now, but if you allow God in your life and you allow him to hold your hand through this, and sometimes he needs to carry us, and yeah, so I'm going to also read something. I got this book from a dear friend of mine. She's a longtime family friend. Her name is Sabrina Brown. She lost her daughter. Today is actually her daughter's heavenly birthday. Happy heavenly birthday, Danielle. But when I lost my son's father, she had already lost her daughter. And she had posted something and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's beautiful. Where can I find that? She responded with, what's your address? And, I wasn't sure what she asked me for my address for. Punchline is I get this in the mail. So throughout everything that she was dealing with, she still took time to send this to me, and that was beautiful. I really appreciate it. Shout out to Sabrina Brown. And we have the same name. Hey. So it's called 365 Days of Prayer for Grief and Loss. So it literally has daily excerpts where, they just have encouraging messages. So today I'm going to read, I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to read it with you guys. So it's called Rooted in Goodness. And that's crazy. What's my podcast? Rooted with Resilience. Wow. God be Goddin'. So rooted in goodness. I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Psalm 27. Good Father, you are quick to come to the aid of your children. When I cry out for help when I cry out for help, you don't delay in meeting me right where I am. Though the weight of grief comes in waves, I am still anchored in the stability of your strong love in every tumultuous moment. Your compassion doesn't despair at my circumstances. Your length of love isn't diminished by my heartbreak. I know that in the darkest of nights, you are my constant companion, both when I can sense you and when I can't. You will not leave me to waste away in the dead of night. Whew. You provide everything I need to sustain me. And in the morning, I will see that your goodness has never left me for a moment. Encourage my heart when your kindness, encourage my heart with your kindness while I wait for the sun to rise again. And then it has a question. When all seems lost, what are you left with? So, it has like little questions there that you can write in there and write, and just kind of reflect and talk to him. But yeah, I just, I feel like I can speak so much more, but I'm going to save that for another episode. We're already hitting an hour. But I really hope that I didn't like ramble and go like elsewhere. I won't know until I edit this video. But I really hope that this video or this episode encourages someone, and just know that you are loved and the devil is a lie. And what do we say? Satan, not today. So I'm going to leave you guys with a song. Hopefully you guys can hear it. It's one of my favorite songs that I listen to when I'm feeling down, when I need a pick-me-up. And yeah, it's just super encouraging. It's called You Say by Lauren Daigle. So if you can't hear it, I apologize. But like I said, it's called You Say by Lauren Daigle. And you can look it up on your own time and listen to it. You could see the lyrics and all that. Alexa, play You Say by Lauren Daigle.
Here's You Say by Lauren Daigle on Amazon Music.
Hopefully you guys can hear it.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. And I'm more than just the sum of every high and every low. Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I'm weak. And you say I'm held when I am falling short. And when I don't belong, oh, you say I'm yours. And I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe the only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity. Oh, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I'm weak. You say I am loved when I am falling short. When I don't belong, oh, you say I'm yours. And I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. Oh, I believe. Taking all I have and now I'm laying it at your feet. You'll have every failure, God. You'll have every victory. Ooh, you say I'm loved when I
Wasn't that beautiful? Like, that song right there just is a reminder, you know, it just hits every word, you know, every word just really, really resonates and reminds you that, you know, your own thoughts can be your own demise, because that's just the devil's lies. But it's what matters is what God says. That's why it's called You Say, you know, and sometimes we need that reminder. So that song right there, you just gotta believe, you know. But I appreciate you guys. If you guys made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate. Please hit that like and subscribe button, share. This is only my second episode, so I need all the support right now. But yes, I will be back with episode 3 hopefully next week, so I'm trying to keep it consistent. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. God bless all of you guys, and I'll see you guys next week.